Hi, I'm Liselle Sambury. I'm a traditionally published author, and welcome back to the Save the Cat Deep Dive series. This is a series in which I take the Save the Cat story structure and I explain how I approach it in my own writing. And so if you've never heard of Save the Cat or Save the Cat story structure, I highly recommend checking out the links and the books below. Save the Cat Writes a Novel by Jessica Brody is the book that I read to learn about the Save the Cat beats. And over time, I've written several novels using this story structure, and so I very much come to have my own way that I use this in my writing, and that's what this series is all about, just sharing that with you. This is not kind of super instructive in the way it's like you have to do this, you have to do that. Your writing practice is your own writing practice, so take what works for you and leave all the rest. I'm just sharing what works for me. So today's beat that we're going to be diving into is the catalyst, also known as the inciting incident. I find that I have a tendency to talk about this beat and to call it the inciting incident because in previous story structures, it's kind of always been known, it's always been known to me by that term. And so if you hear me interchanging those through the video, that's why. But Save the Cat calls this beat the catalyst, and I'm going to share with you Save the Cat Writes a Novel, that definition of what the catalyst beat is. So it says, the catalyst is an inciting incident or life-changing event that happens to the hero which will catapult them into a new world or new way of thinking. An action beat that should be big enough to prevent the hero from being able to return to their status quo setup world. So that's going to be the beat we're going to be diving in today. Again, I also have the playlist link below for me going through all these beats from the beginning. So if you are coming into this series and you want to check out all the videos that have come before, they're right there in that playlist for you. But otherwise, let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to start with is researching the catalyst. So I find this to be a good first step, especially if you're not used to using the story structure, or if you're newer to the writing process, or just if this is a beat that you've struggled with in the past. So a directive that Save the Cat Writes a Novel gives that I think is really, really good in thinking about if your catalyst is a big enough event is, can your hero easily return to their normal world after this event happens? Which I think is a really great way to think about this, but I do think it can be hard sometimes to identify this in your own work, especially if you're newer to writing or you're newer to kind of this sort of structure. And so what I recommend is going into books that you've read, doing research that way, and trying to identify what you think the catalyst event is. This can really be helpful to you because not only can you identify the catalyst, you can kind of see how they work with their characters after that moment, things like that, and it can really get you into the practice of being like, okay, this is kind of what a catalyst can look like. I also think this is really great for identifying what you might like and might not like about a catalyst that you see in a book, because it can also help give you ideas about how you might want to use this event. So an example that I think of is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. So in this book, there is a scene early on where the main character goes to this party, or like gunshots and things like that, which feels like a big event. It feels like a lot is happening, but for the main character, this is actually not that different. Like, she's not completely changed by this, and in fact there's a sort of feeling almost of expecting that and kind of expecting that to happen. So that's not the catalyst event, because she can absolutely return to her normal world after that. But what does become the catalyst event for the main character Star is when she watches her friend be shot by police, and watches him die. This is a person she knows, this is a person who's important to her, and she's witnessed a very clear injustice in that he did not have a weapon on him and he was shot. And so this absolutely changes how her normal life is, and she can't go back to her normal life after this because she's witnessed this great injustice. She also doesn't have this friend in her life anymore. She starts to see different aspects of her life in very different ways based on how people react to what happened to her friend. And so this is a catalyst event because it changes everything. And so this is why I mean in that research can really be helpful for you, because even though, people who may not have grown up in that situation, like a party being broken up with gunshots, for one character that might absolutely be a catalyst event. That totally could be that. But for this character in this specific circumstance with their background, it is not. And so it's good to have an idea of that with research, and I'm going to talk more about that intersection of character and the catalyst event right now. Now we're going to talk about the intersection of the character sheet and your catalyst, or how to reference your character sheet to help you come up with a catalyst. So I do have a video, I'll link it in the description, all where I talk about creating compelling characters and the character sheet that I've put together. I also have a downloadable fill out character sheet, things like that, of how I construct these characters. It doesn't have to be that you've used, however you've constructed your character, as long as you have an idea of what the problems in the character's life is and where you want them to go and to be by the end of the book. Because having an idea of that trajectory can very much help you in deciding what your catalyst event should be or could be. It can help you a lot with brainstorming, and it can help give you a direction for how you're going to come up with that catalyst. And so, for example, I'll use my debut novel Blood Like Magic as an example. My main character Voya, she has difficulty in trusting her ability to decide and control her future, which manifests as indecision. So she has a lot of indecision about a lot of different things. She's not great with making decisions. And where I wanted her to go by the end of the book was to come to trust in her ability to define her own future. And so that's kind of the direction of that. And so the catalyst event ended up being that she had failed to complete the task to become a witch. So it involved a decision, she couldn't make the decision, and so she failed. And that became the catalyst event because then she could not go back to her normal life, because if she went back to her normal life of I avoid making decisions, that's what made her fail in the first place. So she can't keep doing that, because then she will fail again, and she's been given the second chance and she needs to succeed. And so having that trajectory of knowing where I wanted the character to go was helpful in that way, because I know that I want the character to trust in making her decisions. So I've created a catalyst event in which not only is she seeing the consequence of not being able to make those decisions, she is also forced into a new world in which she needs to learn how to make decisions and to trust in her own decisions and trust in her ability to define her future, in order to kind of succeed in that way, and to not deal with the stakes and the bad stuff that happens if she doesn't succeed in doing that. And so that's kind of the way that I use that character trajectory to help, because then you have an idea of where you want the character to go by the end of the book, and you can use that catalyst as a way to push them into that journey. And I think thinking about the way that that ties into character can create a greater strength between that and the character. It creates a more solid connection, which is what I like to do. I write character-driven stories, and so that's the way I think about story, and I do find that that just helps a bit more. And Save the Cat has already kind of made that link for you in saying the character can't go back to the life that they were in before, but I think adding on thinking about the character journey can help you kind of figure out what would be the best catalyst moment in that case. And it makes it very personal to the character. You know, in the example of Star, it's a very personal thing to that character, because as I said, that party where the gunshots went off, to a different character, that could have easily been the catalyst event. That could have been something that shook their world. But for Star, it's really this personal connection between someone she knows and personally watching that injustice play out. And so thinking about the character in that way, I think, can help you come up with a catalyst event that is much more linked to that character versus kind of something that you could slot in any other character and have them experience. This is like very specific. If you are writing a multi-POV story, you can kind of play with this in different ways. You can have your characters have different catalyst moments, the POV characters, or you can have them have the same catalyst moment. In my multi-POV stories that I've done, they've always had a different catalyst moment just because I've always worked with dual timelines in that case, so it kind of doesn't really work for them to have the same catalyst event, but there could be a situation in which they are sharing a catalyst event. I feel like I don't want to use it as an example because I can't remember well enough, but Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo does come to mind because they're all involved in that heist, but I am not 100% sure that they all have that catalyst moment. So do not hold me to that one. But that could be an example of how multiple POVs, multiple characters might have the same catalyst moment. Your next step is to workshop your catalyst. So at this point, whether you've gone through those steps I showed earlier, or you're like me, which is how I am with a lot of my projects, by the time I've come up with the idea for the project, I've already come up with a catalyst that I think is going to work. So in the case of Blood Like Magic, I already knew very early on that the catalyst was going to be that she failed this task. And so that was something I already had in place. And so this may be the case for you also. But at this point, you have your catalyst decided, you've at least thought of some or brainstormed some, or like have one that you're really excited about. And so this is at the point where I suggest workshopping that catalyst to make sure that it works, and that it's hitting on everything that it is supposed to hit on. So, for example, let's say that you have a character living in some sort of medieval type court system world, and they're kind of like maybe like a thief character, and they believe in like stepping on everyone to get to the top, and that's how they've survived, and that is how they are living their life. And that's kind of like their problem or issue. But where you want them to get in the end is you want them to get to a point where they learn that pulling other people up and helping pull people up to their level or to a higher status instead of just kind of stepping on people to get ahead is actually the better way for them to live. So let's say that's the character trajectory that you want. And so your catalyst that you've decided, because I find a lot of times the catalyst ends up being a big part of the pitch or the idea, is that they get entered into this tournament to the death to become a member of court. So that's the catalyst thing. It's like big, it's flashy, it's exciting. You're like, yes, tournament to the death. It's interesting. And you maybe got all these ideas about how you want everything to come together. So on a very technical level, this does fulfill what Save the Cat tells you to do. So that character can't go back to their normal world because they're going to be in this death tournament, and either they're going to live or they're going to die. So they can't go back to their normal status quo world. Done and done. Catalyst, you did it. But not quite. So this is why I do that character system, and I think this can work in Save the Cat as well, but I think it depends on kind of the level that you're thinking of can't go back to their normal world. So if you're thinking of it on the level of like a very kind of like, you know, they literally can't just live the way that they were living before, yes, technically, because either they're going to live or die, and if they live, they become a member of court, and if they die, they're dead, and that's very different from their life, how their life was before. But from a character point of view, in that trajectory that you want them to get to, it actually doesn't change anything in their life because they can continue to step upon people to get ahead, and in fact would really be encouraged in that sort of competition to step upon people to get ahead. So actually, in that case of your character's status quo world and how they were living before, nothing has changed. They can still live that exact same way. They're just going to be in a different situation. And so actually that catalyst doesn't work at all. How you can workshop, how you can shift that sort of catalyst is, for example, if you made it so that in the competition they had to work in pairs. Because if you have to work in pairs, you can't step on everyone because you have to cooperate with someone. And so in that case, they definitely can't go back to the way they were living before because they have to work with someone. They have to not step on that person. And what I would do to push it further, because again, with the system that I'm working with, it's not just can't go back to the status quo world, it's also I want to think about the character trajectory and where I want this character to get in their arc. And so if in their arc I want them to get to this point where they're uplifting other people, what I would actually add to this catalyst is not only do they have to work in pairs, but the person they're paired with is less skilled than them, is actually quite weak, needs their help and guidance in order to be good enough for them both to win this competition. Meaning that the main character must learn how to uplift and help someone else to bring them to their level or higher so that they can ascend together. And so in that way, the catalyst is being pushed that extra bit so that you are creating the trajectory for your character's arc. And so that's why I think about these sorts of things, because again, that in that example, you could have just done work with pairs and it would have been fine. It would have fulfilled they can't go back to their status quo world. But in thinking about it, in thinking about your character's arc, now you have a trajectory. You know that this catalyst is pushing the character towards the place that you want them to go and where you want their arc to go. And so that's why I add things like this, because I think that helps add that level for your character. And so that's kind of how I would think about it when you're thinking about workshopping these catalyst ideas, is to not only think about the save the cat directive of can't go back to their normal world, but also how is this event going to help propel them towards the finish of their arc. And that's it for the catalyst. So not a ton to say about the catalyst and how to get to this point, but I do think the catalyst is a really, really important part of the story, especially when you are thinking about pitching. And this works in both kind of shifts of publishing, you know, in self-publishing, pitching as in the blurb and trying to get it to readers and pitching it to readers, or in traditional publishing, if you're pitching it to agents and publishing houses, that catalyst becomes a very large part of the pitching process and a large part of the story. And so it's really worth taking the time to make sure that's really good, because if your catalyst is really weak or unbelievable, or people are poking holes in it right away, I think you're going to have a much harder time in that pitching process of getting that out and getting people engaged in your story if the catalyst feels really weak, or it doesn't feel as well thought out, or it just doesn't feel like it's working. And so I do really think this is something to take a lot of time to think about and workshop and research. And so even though this video and the sections of this are shorter, I think the time you devote to this should still be significant to make sure that you've got something that really, really works well, because I think it's really going to help in the long run and it'll make a big difference to your story. I do find that it is difficult to change a catalyst or an inciting incident once you've kind of written the whole story, which if you're planning to rewrite is fine, whatever. But I think if you're planning out your story from the beginning, it's very much worth it to take time for this one. And yeah, that was it for the catalyst. Again, I have that playlist linked down below for the entire Save the Cat deep dive series so that you can watch from the beginning. And I will catch you in the next one where we will talk about the debate. And yeah, that's it for this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And thanks so much for watching. Bye!